What does Gucci's $790 turban and Prada's recent sandal controversy have in common? Well, they have all sparked massive outlash for cultural appropriation. Today we are going to dive deep into fashion's one of the most heated debate. When does inspiration becomes appropriation? I'm Vrinda, and in the next 10 minutes we are going to talk about how luxury brands navigate the thin line between cultural appreciation and appropriation. We will examine recent controversies and discover whether there are any actual legal consequences for this misstep. Well, cultural appropriation in fashion is when luxury brands take symbols, designs or traditions from marginalized culture without any permission, credit or understanding. This happens for profit, but it excludes the original creators from the conversation. Let's look at some recent examples. At Milan Summer 2026 men's fashion show, Prada debuted a pair of flat leather sandals that bore a striking resemblance to Indian Kolhapuri chappals. These Kolhapuri chappals are India's iconic handcrafted leather sandals, originating from Kolhapur in Maharashtra. There was a huge backlash since Prada presented the design simply as leather sandals without referencing India or Kolhapur as the source. This highlights an ongoing pattern where Western luxury brands struggle to meaningfully engage with Indian crafts and culture. Just months ago, Dior showcased a stunning 200,000 overcoat featuring traditional Indian Mukesh embroidery at Jonathan Anderson's debut collection. The intricate metal threadwork took 12 Indian artisans 34 days to complete. However, despite the coat becoming a showstopper, Dior failed to credit the Indian artist or even acknowledge the centuries-old Indian craft. The backlash was immediate and widespread, with critics pointing out that Dior profited by showcasing artistry and heritage without actually crediting it. In 2018, Gucci's Fall 2018 runway featured white models wearing turbans, later selling them as Nordstrom for $790. The Sikh coalition called this deeply inappropriate, stating that turban isn't just an accessory but a sacred religious article. However, again, the backlash was swift and the product was immediately withdrawn. So, do we see a pattern here? I mean, I do. The pattern is that powerful luxury brands profit from cultural elements while often excluding the original communities from any kind of recognition, collaboration or even economic benefit. Ultimately, these incidents reflect the exploitation of marginalized cultures by more dominant mainstream cultures. Like everything else, this argument also has two sides. The first argument is that this is just an appreciation of local cultures. Supporters argue that fashion or anything art has always been about cultural exchange. They point out that cross-cultural inspiration has driven fashion innovations for centuries. Marie Antoinette, the last queen of France before the French Revolution, wore Indian Kashmir shawls. Paul Poiret, the great French fashion designer, drew from Africa and Japan. The baseline is that globalization makes pure cultural isolation completely impossible. You will inevitably get influenced by something or the other. So ultimately, maybe we can say that we have to look at the intent instead of the outcome. On the other hand, we have the appropriation concern. The critics here argue that luxury brands have the power and the platform to popularize any trends while the original creators remain invisible. This creates a power imbalance, ultimately leading to credit not being given where it is due. Communities that originate these designs rarely get any kind of financial benefits. Further, it leads to a kind of cultural reductionism, where sacred or meaningful symbols become mere fashion statements. The end point of this side of argument goes back in history, suggesting that this systematic appropriation is just a continuation of colonization and systematic marginalization of certain communities. Dr. Serkan Delis, a senior lecturer at London College of Fashion, emphasizes that the real issue isn't necessarily the borrowing itself, but rather making the laborers invisible. He explains, when appropriation happens, the labor of the original producers become invisible, and that is highly unfair. A senior curator of Brooklyn Museum notes that many times an idea, design or motif of a culture is extracted from its original context and reworked in a manner that can be or is perceived as demeaning. For example, some international brands have printed the images of Lord Ganesha on shoes, bikinis or even leggings. In 2018, Gucci released a sweater that resembled blackface imagery, a black turtleneck with an exaggerated red outline around its mouth. The brand claimed that it was inspired by avant-garde designs, but many saw it as appropriating racial caricatures, historically used to demean African Americans. The crux of the debate is that ultimately it's not really about whether cultural exchange should happen or should not happen. It's about power and profit. The core question is who has the power to represent another culture and profit from it. The real issue here is racial capitalism, gaining social or economic value from racial identity, but not your own. So those who created the culture essentially remain excluded from the benefits of it. If we were to speak legally, the reality check is that in most cases, there is virtually no legal consequence for luxury brands. Unlike copyright or trademark infringement, cultural symbols or designs are typically not protected by intellectual property law. Copyright law protects original work of authorship. But most traditional cultural motifs are collective, ancient and passed down orally. So they do not really have a single owner or author. Trademark law protects brand identifiers including logos, brand names. Cultural designs like a sari pattern are not really brand identified and are not even registered as trademarks. Patent law protects inventions, not cultural expressions. As a result, when a big fashion brand takes cultural symbols and uses it for its own profit, there is no intellectual property law that is essentially being breached. It falls into a grey zone, offensive but not technically illegal. This is where a legal tool is gaining importance, and that is geographical indication tag or GI tag. These are like intellectual property protection for products tied to specific geographic regions. For example, champagne, Pashmina from Kashmir, Kanjivaram silk from Kanjivaram. A GI tag ensures that only authentic products from specific regions can use these names. India has been particularly active in securing GI tags for traditional textiles and crafts. Banarsi sari, Kanjivaram silk, Darjeeling tea, Jaipur's blue pottery and many more have GI tags. The consequence of having GI tag is that it will provide some kind of legal protection when brands try to use products that are tied to specific geographic region. For example, you can't call something Pashmina unless it actually comes from Kashmir and follow traditional production method. But GI tags also have their own limitations. First is that they protect specific products and processes and not general design motifs. For example, a GI tag might protect Banarsi silk sari made using traditional weaving techniques in Varanasi. But it can't stop another brand from using similar thread work on some other product. The protection is essentially tied to the product and the production method, not individual designs that can be adapted elsewhere. They also don't cover spiritual or cultural elements. Sacred symbols like Om, Dreamcatcher or indigenous geometric patterns can't be protected through GI tags. These symbols have spiritual significance that transcends geography, meaning that brands can still use these culturally significant elements without the legal consequences of a GI framework. International enforcement can also be a challenging aspect here. Even if India has a GI tag for Pashmina's shawl, stopping a French luxury brand from saying that they have a product which is inspired by Pashmina requires a comprehensive legal battle across the jurisdiction. Beyond GI tags, some countries are exploring other legal frameworks. The US has Archaeological Resource Protection Act of 1979 and the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act of 1990, which protects indigenous cultural artifacts and burial items from unauthorized use. New Zealand's Patent Act 2013 and Trademark Act 2002 specifically recognize and respect Maori culture and traditional knowledge, requiring consultation with Maori communities before commercializing their cultural elements. So let's come to the main question, which is, as of now, what is the main protection that these cultural elements have? While legal protection is limited, the court of public opinion has emerged as an equally, if not more powerful weapon to ensure accountability. In the past, cultural appropriation controversies might have gone unnoticed or may have been limited to academic critique. But today, social media acts as both a watchdog and an amplifier, giving marginalized communities and their allies a direct channel to call out the appropriation the moment it happens. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, TikTok allow communities to publicly highlight offensive designs, often within hours of a brand launching a product. A hashtag or viral post can quickly put the issue into global spotlight. The digital public sphere now acts as an informal regulatory body. While courts may be constrained by the gaps in the intellectual property law, the court of public opinion wields speed, visibility, and a collective economic power. So ultimately, the brands that are going to thrive in all of this will be those that master the art of cultural appreciation without actually leading to appropriation. Thank you for watching the video. If you like the video, please subscribe to the channel. I will be putting out more such videos in future, so stay tuned.